Hi everyone, my name is Maggie Taylor, and as a part of Heart of Steamboat's Lenten series, we're walking through the last week of Jesus' life. We started off with the Monday following Palm Sunday as Jesus went into the temple, and now we're at Thursday. Thursday has a lot going on. It starts off with Jesus coming back into Jerusalem, washing his disciples' feet in the book of John, and also sharing in a Passover meal, his last Passover meal with his disciples. And then Jesus moves to the Garden of Gethsemane. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about Jesus washing the feet of his disciples, as well as the last Passover meal. Gethsemane will be something we talk about a little bit more next week, but to make sure that we give it its time and attention, we're not going to address all of Thursday, just up to the meal. You might be thinking, well, where are you? I'm sitting in the Tread of Pioneers here in Steamboat Springs. And the Tread of Pioneers is an amazing museum, an amazing asset to our community. It sits right across from the church. And if you have time, take some time to come over here, explore, look. But the Tread of Pioneers kind of takes us back into the beginnings of Routt County and the beginnings of Steamboat. Behind me is a bath and a bunch of other gadgets that would have been found in a kitchen or a bathroom for just everyday life. It reminds us that things aren't as simple as they are for us today. Getting clean or making food, making sure that clothes are ready to be worn or washed. All of those things took more time, energy, effort, and maybe even a little bit more love. The Tread of Pioneers is a wonderful reminder to our community of the places we've come from. And one of the things I want to highlight today is the way that long ago, both in our community and in the world, getting clean wasn't necessarily as easy as jumping in the shower today. I want you to imagine the last trip you came home from, one of those long trips that seemed to have taken forever. Maybe you had a missed flight or a delayed flight. Maybe it ended up being you were camping and it rained and you just feel gross. One of the things you want to do is clean yourself, get your feet clean, change your clothes, all of that. We all know that feeling. As the disciples walked into Jerusalem that day for the Passover meal and came to what we call the upper room where they would share in this meal together, Jesus gets down on his knees, pours water into a basin, and proceeds to wash the disciples' feet. This happens in the book of John, chapter 13. But as he begins to do this, Peter says to him, Jesus, you won't wash my feet. And Jesus responds, if I don't wash your feet, then you're not with me. Oftentimes, this act of service is seen through a lens of sacrifice, just like what happens next. After Jesus washes the disciples' feet, he gets up and they share in a meal together. This is the Passover meal. The Passover meal that is reminiscent of the time in the Hebrew Bible when God passed over the houses of the Israelites, sparing their children because they'd put lamb's blood above the door. The Passover meal is also seen as this act of sacrifice, sacrificing the lamb. And oftentimes, as we move into the communion meal we share as Christians, this sacrifice of Jesus for us. This is my body given to you. Do this in remembrance of me. When you drink this cup, this is my blood given to you. Every time you drink it, do it in remembrance of me. So both this act of foot washing as service and sacrifice and this act of a meal that Jesus is transforming into a new covenant, a new service and sacrifice for us, have often been viewed as purely sacrificial. But what if they weren't sacrifice? What if it was instead service that came out of a posture of love? What if everything that Jesus did that night for his disciples and with them, instead of it being from a need to do it, I have to do it, this is a sacrifice I make for you? What if instead it was, I love you and so I care so deeply for you and so I am doing this? How does that change how we feel about things when something's not out of sacrifice, but something's out of love? As Jesus goes through this movement of this night, he does so much for his disciples and connects with them. He spends quality time with them and serves them. And I believe it's out of a posture of love, just as we act out of a posture of love. Think about some time that someone did something for you that was an incredible act of service. How did that feel? Now, think about how you felt receiving that act of service. Was it something in which you felt love? Most likely. Turning Jesus's acts of what often has been translated as sacrifice into love does two things. First, it allows us to let go of almost this guilt feeling, this ickiness of like, oh, you had to do that for me. Oh, I'm unable to do it for myself. You had to do it. And it allows us to embrace, oh my goodness, what a gift this grace and this love is from you. When something comes to us freely as an act of love, it transforms how we interpret the experience. It makes something not an obligation, but instead a gift. When was the last time you felt like you could accept an act of love without having to return it? Sometimes in our culture, we have to keep score, or we feel like we must. Well, you got me a gift, so I have to get you a gift. Well, you did this nice thing for me, and I don't want to feel indebted to you, so I have to pay you back later down the line. That feeling of indebtedness keeps us trapped. It keeps us from freely expressing God's love to ourselves and to others. What if we both understood when someone wants to help us out, they're doing it out of love instead of obligation, and if we return the favor? Oftentimes in Christian community, we are so focused on the service to others. We want to serve, we want to help, we want to be there, and oftentimes we do it out of a place of love. But when it comes to a time when we need that, when we need to be served, when we need to be cared for, maybe have a meal prepared for us, or have some help getting to the hospital or to the airport or whatever it is, or just someone to listen to, we shy away from both asking for help and for receiving it. We don't want to be a burden. We don't want to be in a place in which we feel we need to return the favor. But friends, God doesn't keep score, and neither should we. Know that when we give freely of ourselves in the way that Jesus gave of himself that night, we are expressing God's love to the world. And when we receive the love and gifts of others in a gracious and caring manner, we receive God's love. In the movie, The Perks of Being a Wallflower, there is a statement, we only receive the love we think we deserve. So realize that that doesn't have to be true. No, we might not always feel that we deserve love, but God doesn't care what we think we deserve. God gives it freely. And hopefully as a community, we can give it freely to each other, knowing that there's no bar that you have to achieve to be loved, but that God knows you as a beautiful child and loves you regardless of whatever it might be that's holding you back. As you go into the world this day, know that Jesus didn't just wash his disciples' feet and share in this beautiful meal as an act of service. He did it as an act of love, a posture of love and care that we continue to bring into our world. Even if we don't have to go and boil water in order to take a bath, We still care for our neighbors by helping them get clean, helping them have food on their table, helping them to reach their goals. As a community, we gather together just as these pioneers did, just as Jesus' community did, to make sure that we're able to do things to help each other out of love, through acts of service, through kindness, and through a place in which we can make a better world. Have a blessed day.